So obviously there's so many considerations when you start looking at LLMs, and I think it's interesting to see the overlap of topics that we've seen throughout the whole day, but how our different researchers are bringing different nuances to it and how it can all come together and be complementary. And to kind of introduce our last speaker of the day, but not least, we're doing a little bit of a shift. Speaking about social physiology to social neural AI. So our last speaker is going to be Guillaume Dumas, who's an associate professor at the computational psychiatry in the Faculty of Medicine at University of Montreal, and also a principal investigator at the Precision Psychiatry and Social Psychology Laboratory at the CHU Saint-Justine Research Center. He holds the Ivado Professorship in AI and Mental Health and the FRQSJ1 in AI and Digital Health. So Guillaume, the floor is yours. Happy to have you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me properly? Yes? Yeah? Okay, so we are advancing the day. There are going to be a lot of pictures. Don't worry, it's going to be all right. I'm a double cap person between medicine and machine learning. And today I will briefly introduce the motivation behind what I'm doing in interface with AI and how it come up to be very turned towards sociality and this dimension that is so important in human cognition. So my lab, as just said, is the Precision Psychiatry and Social Physiology Lab. We are mostly working on 3 axes: computational psychiatry, which is like using mathematics and computer science to help in mental health; precision medicine, and that's more like towards the mandate with Ivado on how we can use data from smartphone to genomes in order to tailor personalized approach to care; and social NeuroAI, which is more like the blue sky science or night science, some people called fundamental research, trying to understand what makes us social from a neuroscience perspective and try to transfer this knowledge to artificial intelligence and machine learning architecture. And so to start with the social physiology, which is like the starting point of all that, for more than 10 years, I've been working on what some people have metaphorically called the dark matter of neuroscience, which is social cognition and social interaction. Because from a paradoxical standpoint, most of the literature in neuroscience was totally ignoring the case of 2 individuals engaged in dynamical interactions. And despite we are probably the most social species on Earth, neuroscience has intrinsically focused on single brain out of any interactive context. And so for 10 years, I've tried to dig into that, developing a 3-fold program. So I like Venn diagrams as a good geek. Experiments, models, and the interface between the 2. So at the experimental level, I've developed a technique called hybrid scanning, which is the ability to record multiple brains simultaneously and synchronized to understand how the brain works in social interaction. At the modeling level, combining biophysical modeling and more recently deep learning modeling to understand social cognition with the principles that we can extract from experiments. And at the intersection of those 2, how to have humans interacting with models and have simultaneously the human tested and our model also benchmarked. So it all started 10 years ago when in PhD, I designed this experiment to record 2 people simultaneously while they are interacting and analyzing frame by frame. At that time, the computer vision was not that developed. Now, fortunately for my student, they don't have to do that. So I spent 11 months indexing frame by frame those interactions and combining those behavioral analysis with brain recordings. And we were able to demonstrate for the first time that just interacting with other people get emergence of interbrain synchronization. So like our neural activity get very tightly coupled with other human beings when we are engaged in social interaction. And so this was like hard to publish and hard to swallow for a lot of reviewers, but it got published in the end and massively replicated. And now there's a huge enthusiasm in the literature and in the community in neuroscience to understand the brain in more situated and interactive fashion. And well, I won't disclose, but so in 1965, there were like one study that did that, but it was about telepathy, but it was in science. So it's funny how sometimes history of science is weird. So since then, we have developed like hardware solution and software solution. We're working on machine learning approach to decode and better analyze those new types of data with multiple streams coming from different individuals engaged in social interaction. Of course, the neural data, but also physiological data and behavioral data, such as like movements and speech. And the application right now, so that's why my lab is not here at Mila, but at the Child and Mother Hospital Saint Justine, is that we are directly on the clinical side, trying to understand how we can use those different toolkits to better have biomarkers, assessments, and potentially even treatment and clinical care. So we are studying, for instance, autism, but we are also trying to understand therapeutic alliance, how during psychotherapy, people get a connection with their clinicians, what are the underlying mechanisms, how we can design new tools, for instance, in the case of telemedicine, to help this connection to be there, even if we are not in person. And if you are interested of the ramification of that, I have recently had an op-ed in World Psychiatry that designed a roadmap for this interbrain and interpersonal psychiatry. So since we are at Mila, I will mostly focus on social NeuroAI now. And to make a transition smooth, the thing is that when I discovered those interbrain synchronization 10 years ago, as I said, it was pretty hard to publish. Maybe it was an echo of this parapsychology paper in Science in the 60s. But anyway, we were like having more question and answer about what were the underlying mechanisms of those synchrony, what were the factors at play, and so on. And so we started to do biophysical modeling and computational modeling to understand, for instance, how similarity at the anatomical level were constraining our propensity to coordinate and get in sync with others. With the idea, for instance, in the case of autism, that having a neurodiversity would alter this ability to get synchronized with others. And so that's what we did. And having this kind of full brain simulations, so in silico experiments, we also developed later on what we call the human dynamic clamp, which is like a kind of human avatar interaction, but where the avatar behavior is ruled by biophysical and neuro-inspired algorithms. So instead of having a prescripted behavior that would gimmick a social interaction, here the idea is to have not only a Turing test, so testing the judgment of the person that interact with the model, but also a kind of implementation test that the model itself should behave and have mechanisms that are in alignment with our understanding of social cognition in humans. And those things led to application. So this, for instance, was initially in research to study the social brain in the lab. We then deployed that in the hospital to use that as an instrument to evaluate social cognition in child with autism and neurodevelopmental disorders. And child with autism being very direct, they told me that my video game was a bit ugly and not well programmed because it was just like a finger on the screen, so not really ludic. So I moved to a video game industry, and now we have even new partners that are even present here, where we try to bring those technology in a more pedagogic and easy to use fashion, both at home, but also in hospitals. And so, for instance, initially, our first prototype was in 2D, but now we moved to mixed reality with HoloLens helmets. So necessitating only like a cap and that's it. And based on those designs, so this is like a graphic depiction of our design. So we have the human participants playing with a game. Here it's called pop balloons. So they explode balloons, virtual balloons in the room. And while they are doing that, the clinician or the parents can see in real time their physiological states, their score, their reaction time, etc. And combining all those data that are collected during the video game, we are able to reconstruct the kind of latent space of the behavior without the child noticing. The child is just popping balloon for 5 minutes and doesn't care much about all that. And using, that was the first attempt with simple architecture like autoencoder, but we developed methods called normative modeling. So to combine that at scale to chart the performance across different populations. So for instance, neurotypical, autistic, hyperactive kids, intellectual deficiency, etc. And using those developmental trajectory to then detect departure from the traditional trajectory of those kids and stratify those patients to identify subgroups. So the idea here also is that despite I say diagnosis like autism, ADHD and so on, here with those normative modeling approach, we try to have a more dimensional way of looking at things than psychiatrists. So we take all the data and try to rediscover subgroup of patients that may be more similar within their group than with others. And sometimes it doesn't match with historical consensus of psychiatry. So that could be super interesting because it's kind of data-driven semiology. And once we have those homogeneous subgroups, we can think about very personalized approach. So this is an illustration with behavior, but we are also working with geneticists on how to use this stratification with other techniques. I told you it's really a picture, no equations. Another aspect, which is more fundamental research, is this social NeuroAI. So in this roadmap paper with Samuele Bolota, we charted 3 axes where we need to explore. So if you have good memory, at the beginning of the talk, it was about the dark matter of neuroscience. We completely took the thing, but for AI now, saying that basically in AI, there's like 3 axes that are not really jointly explored, which is like embodied agents that are biologically plausible and integrate dynamics. And so we are working on those 3 axes simultaneously. So the embodiment, basically with the video game industry and the mixed reality aspect, we are not yet at the robotic, but hopefully one day. For the biological plausibility, I will give you some illustrations soon after that. And for the temporal dynamic, the idea is to move from the classical feed-forward or recurrent network to even more advanced architecture and machine learning that integrate differential equations. So for the more like dynamical aspects, so for instance, we have started by charting a bit the landscape at the intersection between dynamical system, machine learning, and neuroscience, and typically see the different levels of either abstraction or the scale of observation. So it's not the same as modeling a whole cognitive agent or just like a subpart of the cortex. And one application, for instance, in collaboration with our colleague at IBM and MIT, has been to use this kind of hybrid approach of differential equation that integrate our knowledge about neuroscience and deep learning that would fit the missing parts about our knowledge to be better at predicting brain activity. So that's, for instance, in the case of a neuromodulatory approach could be super interesting to have, but we are working also on that from a more biomarker perspective. And regarding the biophysical models and trying to understand better in a plausible way how cognition works in humans, I've been working a lot on how to use spiking neural networks with different neurotransmitter to simulate simple cognitive tasks that would require access consciousness from a psychological standpoint. So that's actually with Jean-Pierre Changeux, who is one of the pioneers in the consciousness research in neuroscience. And we were able recently to have this model that pass, delay, and trace conditioning tasks that are like the minimal tasks that you need technically to have access consciousness. And finally, so because there is the social dimension, so we try to bring this neuro-inspired cognitive architecture in the social domain by first using a theory called the attention schema theory from Michel Graziano that states in a very interesting way that our consciousness and our way of being aware of ourselves come from the evolutionary pressure to have to deal with other people in the first place. So like we have a huge incentive from an evolutionary perspective that our brain predicts behavior of other agents. And once we have developed that, by applying this same biological mechanism to our own behavior, we become conscious. And so we are exploring this very fundamental research. But one of the aspects is that one prediction of that would be that this architecture with attention schema would lead to a better generalization of cognitive tasks in multi-agent settings. And so instead of training one agent for a specific multi-agent task, here it would lead to a more generalized form of social intelligence. And so if you are interested, we have also just today preprint a paper about that with Guillaume. So those are like the different things I'm humble about. And so I think I have a couple of time for questions if required. Thank you for your attention.
Merci beaucoup, Guillaume. I think it's nice to finish off with a more social touch on what's been happening in the space. And I think it'll be interesting to see how it evolves with future, human and AI interactions from a cognition perspective. On that note, I'd like to thank all of our speakers so much for being present today and sharing their research with us. All of our dear partners that are attending today in person. I know it was maybe a bit of a long day, but there was so much to pack in and so many interesting topics to go through. And the involvement of our whole community and our Mila team for making this event possible. Special shout out to Charles Merced for helping putting this together. I'd like to maybe touch on a quick quote that Professor Danya Strida expressed following the last symposium last year, where she said, all rules are shattered when you bring together researchers, industry partners, postdocs, and students. And to us, the community that Mila represents is truly boundary breaking. So we really hope that we can deepen existing collaborations and foster inspirations for new ones throughout events like these. So on that note, drinks and cocktails and food will be served on the other side. You guys can go mingle, and hopefully some questions will pop back up when you're re-energized. And we'll have another session tomorrow morning starting at 9:15 a.m. We'll have some coffee as of 8:45, where some of our researchers are going to explore some different topics that we did today. So notably, we'll have talks by some of our top profs like Glenn Brissett, Daniel Boudok, Guillaume Lajoie. Our applied machine learning team will also be presenting a specific project, as well as our AI for Humanity team. So we hope to see you all bright and early tomorrow morning. But for now, go and enjoy. Thank you so much.